Good, chilly, windy May morning to you. This is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. It's early in the morning, and I'm down letting the ducks and chickens out. Before I talk about the content of this video, I just want to say several folks have asked about what we have done to our fig trees, and I want to make a video on that. I just have not found the time, but I want to let you know that I have heard your requests. I really want to talk about it. I'm doing a two-stage, basically 2-year rehab of my fig trees to get them down to a manageable size and create a scaffold structure. And that video is forthcoming, but not this morning because I'm freezing and I have a lot to do. So folks also asked me, Angela, how is it that you feed your ducks and chickens without encouraging rodents in the chicken run? Especially because I give them table scraps. So I thought I would talk about my morning routine because I'm down here and I'm doing the routine. Now, we've had torrential rains. It's been incredibly muddy and soggy out. And let's turn around and look here. Uphill behind me is all of my garden that is lush and green and beautiful. And it is all uphill. So I have an incline all the way down here, and my ducks and chickens in the back of my garden are at the bottom of the hill. And that means that it is the muddiest, soggiest area. And this is an ongoing issue for me, and I need some better design strategies, but I haven't really found a successful way to deal with it yet, because it's just a matter of adding more mulch to try and soak up the excess moisture is good most of the year, but when we have very heavy spring and winter rains, it's muddy down here, which my ducks absolutely love and my chickens get real ticked off about. So I'm going to turn around and show you. We've been doing lots of work down here, and I'm ready to spread a fresh layer of wood chips, but right now it is quite muddy, and that's just real life, basically having livestock in the Pacific Northwest. It's very muddy. It reminds me of that scene from, there's a British movie, oh gosh, what's it called? I'll back in and think of it later. I'm down here in the poultry run, and we keep a bucket on our kitchen counter, and I fill this with scraps every day. Things I know the chickens want to eat. So I don't put citrus in there. They don't like citrus. I don't put onions in there, onion skins, onion peelings or anything like that. I don't put raw potato peelings in there. Raw potato peelings go in my worm bin. I just put things I know they want to eat. So if there's crusts my kids didn't eat, any leftovers in the fridge that are maybe real old, any kind of fatty trimmings off of meat, eggshells. My daughter puts the seeds from her budgie. So when she changes out Sunny's seed cup, there's always a little bit of seeds in the bottom. She puts that in there. We're trying to reuse and repurpose and take a waste product and turn it into food. So that goes to the chickens. If this bucket is full, and ducks, if this bucket is full, I know that that is about a full breakfast for my birds, particularly if a quantity of it is vegetable matter, like the outer leaves off of a cauliflower or, the woody core of some kind of vegetable. So I come down in the morning and I let the ducks and chickens out. They're in separate houses. You can check out my video on that. And if that bucket is not mostly full, I put a little scoop of feed on top. Later in the summer, I will be able to just, as I walk down through the garden, carry my bucket and pluck things off of trees like gummy berries and mulberries, and I'll be able to just pull up some greens around the garden. Right now, I'm mostly doing radish greens for them, tree collards, Swiss chard that has overwintered, and a little bit of comfrey. But later, they'll be a little bit more calorically dense. There'll be a lot more fruits that I'm picking that I grow for them. And I'm filling that bucket, and I come down here and I dump it out on the ground. And I know that if I have more than 3/4 or a full bucket, that it's too much for them to eat for breakfast, and it will sit on the ground and attract rodents during the day. And songbirds, which right now with H5N1, I don't want to attract birds into the run. And I have a video coming on that. We're trying to enclose a portion of the run for the next few months now that H5N1 is here in Oregon. I'm really stressed out about it. I'll talk about that more later. So I only give them a quantity that they can eat. A long time ago, when we first started keeping ducks and chickens, there was a book, I want to say it's like Story's Guide to Keeping Chickens maybe, but I could be wrong on that. If I find it, I'll drop it in here. But I read it ages ago before we started keeping poultry. And it said, feed your birds twice a day, however much they can consume in 5 to 10 minutes. And that will be sufficient caloric intake if they are free ranging and also have access to things like worms and grubs and bugs and slug eggs and things like that. And I have followed that rule and it has served me really well. So I only throw down what I know through a relationship with my birds the quantity that they will consume in 5 to 10 minutes so that everybody in the flock gets enough to eat, but there is not leftovers after that period of time. If there are leftovers after 10 minutes, and I'm down here for about 10 minutes taking care of chores, like refilling their water buckets, because ducks need to immerse their whole face in open buckets of water. If there's any left at that point in time, I bury it. And what's usually left is like the core of a cauliflower or the core of a cabbage. They eat pretty much everything else, definitely anything that's kind of a carbohydrate or a fat they eat. So for me, that has worked really well. Then the evening routine, I come down and I give them feed, which could be commercial feed, or if I've done a bunch of cooking during the day, it might be another bucket of scraps. And I throw down a bunch more greens from the garden. And throughout the day, kids are usually down here feeding them extra greens, and we give them a little treat. I'm going to show you over here. I keep a pitchfork in the garden, and that's for turning over worms. Ducks absolutely love worms. Chickens really love them too. And they're in abundance. As long as I'm building soil in my garden, I am encouraging the healthy and really abundant population of worms in my soil. And so if I just take my pitchfork and I flip over a layer of wood chips, or I flip over that top layer of soil, it releases a big mound of worms and they just dive for it. So that's a great protein and fat-rich snack. Chickens know when I pick up the pitchfork that there are treats coming, and they usually come running. So I just want to flake up a little bit. I'm doing this one-handed while holding the camera, so bear with me, y'all. Hi, babies. It's worm time. I find that when it's muddy and the soil is compacted, this is particularly helpful for the ducks who can't scratch and can't really dig to get to the worms. If the ground is a little bit compacted from the birds running around down here, or the rain has really made it difficult for them to get underneath, giving them a little bit of assistance allows them to then bill underneath and get the worms. So especially for the ducks, I'm doing them a solid. I'm helping them out. And so that is kind of like an extra little layer of treat that, like, I come down during the day, or the kids do, or sometimes I do it at breakfast if I know I'm going to be gone most of the day. I flip over a few forkfuls of soil and I let the birds go to town. That is my routine for feeding them. Twice a day, 2 main feeds. Breakfast is always kitchen scraps. I want them to utilize all of the kitchen scraps before I consider using commercial feed. That's how we keep our commercial feed use really low. And by commercial feed, I mean, sometimes I end up buying pellets because they're cheap and they're on sale. And sometimes I end up buying bulk grain and mixing it and soaking it. It just depends on the time of year and my energy level. I realize buying pellets is not ideal, but sometimes that's the reality of what I have to do. Now, in the summertime, and basically I'm not feeding them any feed at all. Between 6 of us in our household, and the scraps that we produce and what comes out of the garden and the bugs in the garden as they free range, I don't use any feed. But right now it's really cold, it's unseasonably cold, and our season is a little bit delayed. And so I find that I'm having to give them that feed in the evening, a little bit of it, like half a yogurt scoop. Later in the summer, they'll be feasting on tomatoes, and I will have potatoes coming out of the garden. And in autumn, I will have pumpkins that I can roast for them. And so I don't really have to buy feed. It's just that kind of like hungry gap where it's late winter and into spring where I have to give them any commercial feed at all. But that's twice a day. Throw down what they can eat in 5 to 10 minutes, no more. Then the rest of the day, I let them free range for greens, bugs, bug eggs, weed seeds in the soil, and then they get another round where they get a dinner. Same thing, have to consume it all in 5 to 10 minutes. I don't leave any food loose. I do not have open hanging containers of free choice food at all. That has really helped. Portland has a terrible rodent problem. It's a constant issue. Even if I don't have rodents on my own property, they live everywhere in the neighborhood and they come in. They can tell they're attracted to poultry. It's just a reality you're going to have to deal with. And if you want to be a responsible neighbor, at least in my opinion, don't leave free feed out for your birds, because you're leaving free feed for rodents. And also, again, you're leaving free feed for songbirds, which right now we want to keep out of our runs if we can, to reduce the transmission of H5N1. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that answered the question. I got so many questions about, like, what is your routine for feeding your birds? What's that look like? I hope that answers your question. And I will be back tomorrow. I have loads going on in the garden this week. Thanks.